Hello and welcome to the final episode of season 2 of the Property Lifestyle Mastery podcast. It's just me today, you just got Jackie, and using this as a bit of a change of pace really, as an end to the season. And yeah, this is recorded end of November 2025. Wow, what a crazy year it's been. And I think, normally we're very much themed in terms of different conversations that we have on the podcast, but I wanted to really take a change of gear with this episode to really turn it more onto us and some of the main lessons that we've had through this year and some of the stuff that's been going on for us behind the scenes, which I think we often probably underestimate how valuable it is to share that along the way. So this is really an opportunity for me to do that. So I'm going to be sharing today some of the highlights and lowlights of 2025 for us, including some of the illusions that have been broken for me through this year. We talk a lot about letting go on this podcast. And there's been more of that this year for sure. So I'm going to be sharing what that has manifested like this year. I've also learned a lot about your genius or my genius zone this year and seeing that from a different perspective. So I'm going to share some lessons about that as well, and also how I found joy in some really unexpected places this year. So a real dive under the hood of 2025, particularly for Jackie, but also for myself, the property strategy team, Tomes Homes, just on the whole, what's worked, what hasn't worked, what we've learned, and what that means going into 2026. And my hope is that by sharing this with everyone listening, that it helps you also to kind of reflect on your year and what you've learned, how far you've come, and hopefully to, connect on that level where we are all just humans going through life, doing the best that we can with whatever life throws at us. And I'm sure 2025 has had plenty of that for you as well. So this is just to show that, you're not alone of all the challenges that are going on there as well. So for us, this is interesting for me, the podcast season 2, just that decision for it to come to an end. And I think for me this year, I've a lot more leaning into intuition and just feeling into what is the right direction, which is something that I just wouldn't have even known what the hell that meant if I went back even 5 years. That wouldn't have really meant anything, but now it just is starting to mean everything. So for me, it's so much less these days about thinking my way to the next phase of what we're going to do. Of course, still doing that, but that's that part of it is easy for me to think through stuff, but the leaning into just what is feeling like the right direction. And I don't know how many of you know who listen to this podcast, but obviously we've featured Simon Tandry this year on the podcast for the second time, and Simona. Simon is incredible energy healer, vortex healer, and inspired by him, I've taken several of the energy healing courses on vortex, and it's been so amazing for me just connecting more with my inner wisdom. And I think the learning what yes and no feels like in my body has been such a powerful sensation, that there's just obviously so much more than we can, that goes on in the universe than we can really comprehend with our own minds. And I think for me, that power of realising I can't necessarily think it all through, I can't necessarily make sense of all of it, but if I just drop down and get out of my head and stop thinking and start feeling the felt sensation of whether it's the right thing to do or not, the path becomes incredibly clear. So for me, that sensation of something being a yes is kind of like from my abdomen, like a kind of pulling sensation. It's like a drawing forwards, really tender and light. It's not like a yanking, it's like a gentle pulling towards. And when something is a no, it's almost like a slight retreating, a slight closing in and pulling back. And so that I've used this so much more this year, and I think Dave loves using it as well. Is we had a social with all of our team members in the Philippines this weekend just gone, which was amazing. And we did an exercise about each other's strengths and weaknesses, and it was really interesting reading Dave's perception of my strength at this point, which was much more around using intuition to make business decisions, which was different to what everyone else wrote. But then Dave is very close to me, he sees all of the joy and the chaos that goes on behind the scenes. So for him, that was actually my biggest strength, and I think leaning into that so much more in terms of that direction, it's just got such a lovely flow and ease and just taking the right direction, which has been so nice. And I guess that for me is part of the reason of choosing to bring season 2 of the podcast to a close, which I think in the past, I would have just kept going at stuff, even if maybe I'm not, kind of so excited and drawn to it in the same way. But for me, I probably 2 months ago just starting to feel like, right, this is time to start thinking about wrapping up this season, which interestingly also aligns with the seasons. And I think the longer I go in business and property, the more value I see in that kind of honouring the cycles, our own cycles through the day, through the month, particularly as a woman, and then through the year, and I think even beyond. It's kind of liberating, and I think it just kind of releases energy. So that for me, the decision to bring this podcast to a close was just for this season. Don't worry guys, not forever. For this season was just that feeling that it was right to do that, and knowing that the spring will come again and new inspiration and energy will come again to create, and that just making the whole thing more enjoyable. I think it's really interesting how much we habituate to things as humans, and when things just become normal and what you're doing, you don't appreciate them in the same way, which I think is another reason why it's good to have breaks from the podcast. It makes us all appreciate it more. It makes me appreciate recording them and having that time in the diary to talk with a guest or with Dave and Dom, like it not just being a normal thing that just happens. It's a gift for it to happen. So as we come to the end of 2025, I think it has just been one hell of a year. I must say, I've never been hugely into astrology. I've never been against it, never been hugely into it, but I think Dom has shared a lot this year how 2025 is astrologically quite a big year of just change and things breaking apart. And I think it's interesting looking at our year and also all the people that we work with, whether that's team members or clients, and just seeing that actually when I really step back and look at the bigger picture, it's been a crazy year of change, and I think it's made me be way more open-minded to what astrology has to say, because of course these massive planets out there are moving around, and of course that's going to change the direction of things. Like we're these tiny little specks of stardust walking around the earth. Like of course these massive things that move all around us in space are going to have that big impact. And looking at what that has had the potential to mean for this year, for me it's been liberating, I suppose. So just that kind of acceptance that there's so much that we don't understand, so much that is so much bigger than we are. And for me, when I accept that and just allow that change to happen and not try and hold on and control things, as you all know, definitely a bit of a control freak in trying to be in remission. I'm not sure I'm in remission yet. And yeah, just seeing how I feel like many relationships this year in team, in clients, things have just gotten to the point that it's ready to shift and change, and people moving on or us moving on, and some of our relationships with suppliers also just coming around and coming to really an end point. And I think it can be easy to want to judge that, like we kind of, I don't know, maybe I speak for myself personally, I've always thought that, when you create a relationship that somehow should always be there. But I don't know who said it, but people come into our lives for a reason, a season, or a lifetime, and so therefore that means most people don't come into our lives for a lifetime. So just allowing that ebb and flow of relationships in and out of our lives, and just realising that is a healthy thing to do, and that if, for me personally, like old wounds mean that I really want to hold on to stuff, like that's my natural conditioning to do that, but actually it can become really heavy, like holding on to things, to relationships, to projects that are maybe no longer in alignment. And so actually when I stop trying to control how things happen and just find this trust deep within that it's all going in the direction that it's meant to, and just allow things to change, it just brings so much more ease and flow, and therefore I see so much more positive is maybe the wrong word, just more of being drawn in the direction that feels right rather than doing what I somehow feel I should be doing. And I think that's definitely been a theme for me of 2025, is just continuing to just let go of that old conditioning. I spoke a lot at the end of season 1 about the amazing work that I had done with Rebecca Hill on human design, on rapid transformational therapy. If you haven't already heard listen to Rebecca's episodes, I think they're from the beginning of season 2, definitely check those out. It's the work that Rebecca does has just been so transformational for myself, for Dave, for so many clients that we're working with as well. And I think for me, doing that work with Rebecca was really summer of 2024, and just seeing how it just, things kind of unravel and change in their own time. And I definitely still continue to see the impact of those changes from Rebecca in terms of a continued letting go of how I used to do things. I think that feeling of like responsibility for others and taking too much responsibility for others, or feeling like I have to work hard, even though I don't want to or need to, that just being such an underlying driver that hasn't come from a good place. And just 2025 has been a continuing letting go of that, which sounds wonderful, right? But it's brilliant and challenging at the same time, because it just really challenges that sense of safety, in terms of feeling, I guess it challenges my sense of self-worth before I've taken too much responsibility for others, like particularly thinking maybe how I have mentored people over the years. I think a large part of that has been me taking too much responsibility for the other person, which of course has been brilliant and people have loved it, but also in the same way, when you take too much responsibility for others and their problems, you actually disempower them from the full ownership that's required for them to truly be able to own them and solve them. Because as a mentor, you don't want to become a crutch to someone. You want to be able to help them to learn and grow and evolve and see a new direction, to be able to step into it, and ultimately you've done your job if they don't need you anymore. Like, that's a great mentor. But I guess some of my wounds have probably meant that I've held on to relationships, and even in a mentorship capacity, where actually it's time for it to move on and grow and evolve, and that means that we've done a good job. So yes, for me, this year's been questioning like my people pleasing further, and realising that just how deep that runs, that desire to please others, but starting to see more of the harm that it causes others, actually, because I think people pleasing sounds like a good thing at first, but when you then start to realise what that means, it's basically, in my case, definitely a control mechanism where I'm looking to control the other person's reaction to me, and part of that is probably keeping them close because I have deeper wounds that are around abandonment. So realising that actually sometimes the best thing that can happen is that someone is actually annoyed at you. like for me, there's actually more value at this point in my life, someone being unhappy with me and displeased with me, because it really makes me confront that people-pleasing side of myself, which is actually incredibly unhealthy for me and for those that I have relationships with. And that's, that's of course still a work in progress, but the more I can see that perspective of, I have to do what feels right in that situation, and what often might feel right is not necessarily going to lead the other person to having a positive reaction to me, but that doesn't mean that it's a bad thing, because I think continuing down the road of what we sometimes perceive as bad actually can turn out to be the best things. Like the worst property deals that we've ever done have turned out to be the biggest teachers and the biggest benefit, I would say, to the people that we've mentored, as an example. And there's so many examples of that. And I think for me, human design spoke a lot about that with Rebecca on a previous episode, and just continuing to work with their human design information, I just feel like I'm only scratching the surface of it, but just looking at how I can use that more. We've used it more with clients, mentees this year, starting to use it more with our internal team this year, starting to even include it as part of that hiring process, just to understand people on that deeper level. And then that's also meaning for me just leaning into my energy type as a manifester, and just learning to own it more, which for me means learning how to rest, which I'm getting better and better at. As always, I don't know that we're ever done. Hopefully not. I guess it would get boring if we're just suddenly perfect. It's never going to happen. So for me, realising that the more that I honour my desire to rest, the more clarity that I have, the more that I stop trying to keep up with Dom and Dave at their manifesting generator pace, which is they're so good at juggling so many different things, and they get a lot of satisfaction from that. The more that I create my own space that is separate from that, the deeper my convictions and my wisdom is. So, and realising that we all have our brilliance, but in order to really make our brilliance shine, we've got to really own that, and I think put ourselves first. And I think there's such negative connotations in our society about putting yourself first, like you must be selfish if you put yourself first. But actually I'm realising that the more I honour what I need for myself, the better I actually show up for everyone. And I think for me, definitely being a manifester, that leading by example with what I can do actually shines the light for everyone in a way more powerful way than me just working a bit harder and doing more for others. Actually me focusing on resting, doing what I feel is right for me at the time, rearranging sessions or meetings if it doesn't feel right to me at that time, kind of, I guess, gives that permission for us all to know that it's all right to honour what we need. And by doing that, it doesn't hurt others. It actually can be a huge catalyst for inspiration and change. And that allowing, this year I've really focused on allowing myself to work more, work on what I want to work on when I want to work on it. And that's always been for me like the vision of, it's been part of that vision for what the ideal life would look like. But I think it's interesting that we all have this idea in our mind of what point we have kind of, in brackets, made it, and therefore when you're kind of allowed to do things, which I don't know if that sounds weird to you or not, but for me it's crazy that moment never arrives unless you just choose to grab it. Like that moment to work on what you want to work on and to be guided by what feels right. You don't get permission from the world to do that. You create the opportunity for that to happen. And that's, I think for me, it's been liberating. Scary, but also liberating in terms of I've just stopped waiting to finish what I feel like I need to finish to start working on what I want to work on. And I think at first, when we were first investing in property, I'm a very organised person, and when we first started in property, everything was really neat and organised. When it was just me and Dave and maybe a couple of people helping us for a few hours, everything was really neat and organised, and that was great, but it was also limiting. And past a certain point, when we started expanding more, I realised that actually that desire to have everything neat and tidy and organised, all the systems perfect and written down, was actually a barrier to growth. So I learnt to let go of that order in order to be able to grow. And managed to keep just enough order together, as most of you know, by just focusing on one model in property to be able to grow. And that held it all together. But that letting go of that order and structure was important to me, because actually it wasn't something that I wanted to do at that point. It was like I need to do it. It was scary for me to not focus all my time on that. But by swinging to the other direction, and that's, I think, this pendulum swinging to the other way, actually means you let go of a load of parts of yourself. You have to confront those things to find a completely new way of doing things. And I think for me, 2025 is starting to come back to go, you know what? I used to do that stuff because I did actually really enjoy it. I probably didn't enjoy it as much as I could have done because it was not coming from a good place at that moment to focus my attention on those things. And that's come, 2025, I'm like, you know what? No, I love creating that order and that structure and getting the right processes in place. And for me, I'm great at that collaboration between people to make that happen as part of our internal company. And I've just allowed myself more time to do that this year. And it's just been a joy. Not waiting for permission to do what I want to do, just doing it has been amazing. And partly that's been possible in terms of starting to realise that everyone has stopping on taking responsibility for everyone else's stuff, because I think that's been part of it too, and part of what's made me a great mentor but also held me back, that taking responsibility for other people's things, but actually realising that until people take responsibility for their own challenges and that, feeding into those, but then taking responsibility for it, you never really move past it. And that seeing whether I've overreached has been counterproductive and created dependency in a way that isn't good, and realising that as I let go of that, it also allows more space to come in for me to really find my own joy and flow again. And this is for me where the illusion, come back to the illusion that's been broken this year, is that I've always felt that if I create the right structure, the right processes, the right rhythms, that suddenly everyone will be able to get what they need from all of that. And I guess I'm particularly thinking about, it applies to all areas, but definitely mentoring others, like how I've created the Dealmaker Accelerator program and how I've put that all together. And it's been, obsession's too strong a word, but a drive to just get all the pieces of the puzzle in place to create the perfect program. Didn't realise that was what's happening, probably until I just said it just there. To create the perfect program, that it would all just work perfectly. And I guess that's part of what the illusion that's broken is that, again, there is no perfect. And it's just me realising that perfectionism is totally unattainable, and that everyone is on their own journey, and that it is going to be messy and imperfect, and people are going to be ready to get it when they get it. I can't control how someone comes about coming to the conclusion of what they want to do. I have to create the environment and then let go and trust and allow that to happen. And I think that's actually really healthy. But for me, I had this delusion that somehow I could create something that meant I could control how that process happens. But that's been, for me, that breaking of the illusion. Everyone's on their own journey. Everyone's going to go at the pace that they're going to go. Everyone's going to learn things when they're ready to learn things. We're all here with our own path that we're on. And I think it's was painful, I guess, to kind of see that, but then also empowering at the same time too, I suppose, because the more we all just, I guess, accept the imperfection and messiness of life, the more beautiful it all ends up being. And that's also been part of this learning more from a lived experience what genius means. If you haven't read the book The Big Leap by Gay Hendricks, highly recommend it. I first listened to it when we were in the Maldives in 2021. Just such a great way of talking how we limit ourselves and hold ourselves back. And he talks about your genius zone. This is like the thing that you work on, that is just, you are, better at it than most other people in the world. I think he even says it's completely unique to you. But I've just learnt more this year how hard it is to identify our genius zone in ourselves. Because the problem is, for us, our zone of genius is easy to us. Like, it's the thing that, when you're like thinking about what you should delegate, it's, I think, often the thing that we just think, well, that's an easy task, so therefore I should maybe delegate that first. But the problem is our perception of that thing is distorted, because for us it's easy because it's basically one of our deepest skills that doesn't even feel like anything to us. And I think that's why it's so hard to see it. And just realising how everyone is often so keen to give away their genius to someone else to do because it doesn't feel like anything. And so for me, that this year is something I've seen in myself just again, and it's, partly I've judged it. Partly I've judged not feeling that it's something that's good enough, that it's a bit lame, but that's part of the denying of it that's a problem. So for me, from what I can see of myself at this moment, and hey, let's see what the podcast wrap up in 2026 says, but it's organising. It's organising complex situations, messy, something that seems chaotic and you can't see a way through it, and just bringing that order and structure to something so it can just slot together and work. It I am always tidying up. Even as a kid, I was always tidying up, organising my teddy bears. I'm always reorganising wherever I am. If we're in the motorhome, poor old Dave never knows where anything is because it's always a constant journey of optimising, tidying up, organising things. And it's my genius. And it's always sounded like really crap. Oh, I'm really good at organising. But I have stepped more into owning that part of myself, and I guess that's what finding joy in unexpected places has meant for me this year, realising it just brings me a lot of joy. And being able to, in my case, sit on Asana and use Asana as a project management tool to bring order and structure to my company I love it. And for me, it's just where that time can disappear. It's something that you're drawn to do really at any time of day, and it brings you that energy. So I guess the question to throw out to you is like, what's your genius? What are you underestimating the value of? And what do you maybe need to reclaim? Because I think the more that I reclaim time spent working in my genius zone, the more energy that comes up and the more inspiration and the more clarity. So let's talk about property, shall we? 2025 from a property perspective. I think the property industry is crazy, and so I bought the first property in 2014, and I think already hearing what stories have been like from people maybe in the 10 years preceding when I got into property, and maybe even in the 10 years before that, it has only gotten harder and harder. I think it just seems crazy to me how long a refinance takes to go through these days, how many questions that mortgage lenders ask, how little ability there is for lenders or people who have authority within the property space to be able to take a view. And I think we've struggled with that. I'm seeing everyone around us struggle with that, and just seeing more and more the fact that in the industry there are so many problems that are unsolvable. Really, the only way you can solve them is to deal with your own mindset, which is definitely obviously what we've espoused a lot on this podcast, is how you manage yourself when you're investing in property is so essential, because so much of it is out of your control. I think it's so many people kind of want to come and get stuff from you, so we are obviously perceived as those that have a lot, which obviously of course we do, but probably not as much as what everyone else perceives. Everyone else is like, just the general narrative within the UK is obviously that property investors are the bad guys. I think politicians have done an incredible job of positioning us as the villains and the reason that so many things are wrong with the UK. We're a very easy scapegoat. So I think that looking at that narrative and then what that has meant for the changes in the property industry, obviously Section 24, the tax changes really coming through, but then stuff getting layered on, like more the tax advantages of property being taken away, of course the Renters' Rights Bill, and just and it comes back to this pendulum idea, right? Like, of course, in the past, the pendulum swung way too far in the landlord's favour, and it was awful, the conditions that were created for so many tenants, and the powers that the landlords had were too strong. And unfortunately, I'm just seeing, even just through my own life, that when I've been strongly one way for a period of time, the pendulum has to really swing to the extreme opposite to be able to find the middle. And the middle is of course the best way, but you can't find the middle until you've found the extremes. And I feel like that's where we're going, really swinging over to that extreme where it's everything is loaded onto the landlords, more regulation, more legislation, obviously swinging towards the favour being for the tenant, and we're in the thick of it. I'm not sure I think the pendulum's got further to swing still, and it's been really hard. It's not so much for ourselves, whilst it has been challenging, but more having to watch everyone go through this as mentors, as part of our portfolio cash flow optimizer service, where we're providing management accounts for people, and just hearing how many people are struggling. It's not easy. And so if maybe you felt a little bit like that this year, just know you're not alone. There's not maybe anyone that I can think of that hasn't encountered that kind of challenge in some way. And I think for us, personally, that's meant a shift away from renting in the PRS and more towards commercial leases, and actually selling off some properties that are where the opportunity arises to do so. So it's been a real shift this year in terms of the direction of this sort of existing portfolio. So the stuff that we already have, it's just been a real push in a different direction to the sort of people and the sort of leases that we ultimately have on all of our properties. We've had some not particularly lovely tenants rent some of our properties, probably the understatement of the year. It's been a podcast I've been meaning to do about someone who actually was stalking me on social media and abusing all of our team. That's a story for another day, but it's we've had some tenants that are not particularly loving individuals and very hard to please and serve, no matter how much we do. And so this year was really a bit of a biting of that bullet of saying, and when the Renters Reform Bill is coming through, now's our opportunity to serve notice to the tenants who are not enjoyable to serve, no matter what we do. So that's been really tough. Loads of evictions going through. Exactly what the government has, feared has been the impact of the Renters' Rights Bill. It's definitely been our lived experience of that as well, so it's been tough, but we're definitely coming out the other side of it, and the portfolio in a very different shape, with a very different mix of commercial leases, some emergency housing, etc. And then also this year, it's been a kind of amalgamation of us moving into a new direction with the new deals that we've been doing. Obviously, since the interest rates went up after that Liz Truss budget, 2022, and just sort of the impact that had on interest rates and what that has meant for us in terms of doing new blocks of flats deals in our area. Just the mechanics of the cash flow once we start to look at purchasing, refinancing a higher value, pulling a good chunk of your money back out, just the cash flow was not high enough for it to work. So it was a journey to deciding what exact direction that took from there. And we've actually moved into purchasing HMOs. That's really come to fruition over 2025, and working with partners who've come through from our mentorship program, people who are doing that model in their area. So we have established two new areas in 2025 with HMOs, and again a lean towards more commercial leases as part of that process. And as always, teething pains of new areas, new team members. It's never not a learning curve, and I think we didn't have a choice but to change the direction that we were going in based on the fact that the model that we were running pre Liz Truss, love her, didn't work in the same way anymore. And to be fair, that Thanet was already changing that direction anyway in terms of the values versus where the rents were. It was just when we moved to start investing in Thanet, it was 2016 into 2017, and we really said it'd be great if we could have a good 5-year area here, because our previous one in Southeast London had only been a couple of years, and we got way more than that, so it was time. But it was just a reminder yet again, there is no perfect model. Every model has their teething pains. I think some models are better at different times in the market, and whenever you're going into a new venture, we always have rose-tinted glasses on, and I think it's never going to be perfect. There's always going to be challenges to overcome because you've got to learn the lessons of the new thing. So, it was yet another reminder: only shift the model when you absolutely have to, when it actually is broken and you can't make it work from a financial perspective, because the grass isn't greener, it's just a different shade of green. Obviously it's just what I'm preaching to the converted here, but we all do it. We all think that the new thing is going to be the better thing, and it's just different. And then we've also really established a lot more loans out to others this year as well, which has been a really something that Dave's really particularly enjoyed doing, to be able to kind of switch and be in more of that investor position for others has been really nice. I think that's my main gripes about property for this year. But I guess it's for us looking ahead to 2026, part of the direction that we're kind of leaning towards going is part of this, taking account of the landscape and where it is and why we're doing things. That the property market being where it is a big part of that consideration for the direction that we're ultimately wanting to go in. So let's talk about something more positive than the challenges of property. Definitely the highlight of the year was our retreat in Italy, and bringing together so many clients that we've worked with for so many years and bringing them together with people that are really very important in our lives in terms of our personal growth and development, like Stacey, like Simon, Simona, Rebecca, all people featured on this podcast, and just bringing that all together was just joyful. Really, really a wonderful experience, and just I think it also shows you the progress and how far that we've come along those ways as well, which was really wonderful. I think we've also had big team shifts this year. We've hired some new team members in South Africa, which has been really interesting. I think we've spoken on this podcast as well about candour and the culture of candour, and that's something that we really lean into more and more as we realise that's for us, what our company needs is everyone giving each other candid feedback all the time in the best interest of each other and the company. And I think that is, I would say, generally more aligned with the South African culture, and it's been just a really nice fit with some of the new people that we've started working with out there. But that shift towards that and that candid energy being more a part of the fabric of who we are, I think interestingly I feel our values have been shifting. It's been a gradual shift over the last few years, but we've had a set of 5 core values that we've had in place really since 2015, and they've changed very little apart from, tweaks and refinements. And actually I reworked our values recently, and 2 of them had changed completely, and that was bringing in much more of the vibe of a positivity, as in like a positive attitude to solving challenges. So it's not about bitching and moaning and taking others down, it's about raising everyone up. So that wasn't quite reflected before. And then also authenticity, so how we kind of show up as ourselves, and allowing the sort of whole person that we are to come up to work is important, because we are just a bunch of humans doing stuff, and this whole like professional identity that has to show up for so many is not something that brings me joy at work. And I think the more open and authentic that I am, that's more of a shift in that direction. And so this change has meant that we've got more team members. We've had some changes in team members over this year as part of that culture really shifting. And also that's 2025 anyway, right? Like it's about things breaking down and changing. And looking ahead to 2026, for us it's been a lot this year. It's been a lot more than we imagined. I think I've done so much hiring this year, so many team changes, really as fast as I've hired. We've had people changing over. Some it's been their team members' personal decision, some it's been more of a mutual decision, and some it's been our decision. So a lot of change, a lot of recruitment, with new people coming into roles, which has just meant, and whilst also being growing across the different businesses that we've got, has been really tough. And so for us coming into next year, I feel very excited about where the team is across the different services that we've got. So obviously we've got our property being our main thing and the portfolio there, and then obviously that's spawned Dealmaker Accelerator, the mentorship program, which then has spawned the property portfolio cash flow optimizer, working on management accounts, and then that's now created and it's very much in its early stages. Actually, we have now a chartered accountant in our team filing accounts for us, which is an extension of the portfolio cash flow optimizer service. And that is weird, like to think that we are now becoming a full service accountancy firm. If you'd have told me that 10 years ago, I would have thought you were crazy, but actually can just really see Dave and I both very much drawn to it, seeing such a need with the people that we're working with as part of the PCO service, and it being a bit of a sticking point for a lot of people, that accounts filing service. So to be able to bring that fully in-house together, to be able to offer the full end-to-end service to everyone, it's I can just really see the vision for it, and I'm very excited, like the amount of processes created from the very beginning with that service and how that's already looking, and the initial reaction is very exciting. So that's going to be a big focus for us next year, and it feels very timely in the market in property in the UK at the moment. It's tough. All the regulation and legislation costs everyone a lot more money, and so therefore we need to be more on top of our finances as much as we can wherever possible. And so being able to offer streamlined accounts filing services and doing it for a fair price, and that coming in alongside other financial reporting to be able to make informed decisions about how to improve cash flow and profitability, just feels like something that is just the right time to really focus on. And Dave and I are both absolutely loving the direction that is going, and even loving the problems that have come up through all of that. So looking ahead to 2026, it's going to be a bit of a consolidation year for us, really. taking stock of everything that we've built, looking at what no longer serves us, and asking ourselves some big questions about what that means for the year ahead. It's also Dave's 40th in 2026, so we are going to be doing some big adventures for that, and really for us making sure that our business can really operate on unsocial time zones. So +8, -8, want to be able to work on these, which at the moment that's not something that's easy for us to be able to do. So we're going to be focusing on systems, on process, on team, and just really tidy up and fill in some gaps. And collaboration with AI, really starting to see how AI actually can come in and work with us, and it's not really in the way that I feel is generally being portrayed out there. So maybe an episode on that next season. And I personally am also dealing with I found out about a year ago that I have a tongue tie, which wasn't dealt with when I was a baby. So adult tongue tie is a thing, and it's amazing the number of health issues that have come up that I have that all link back to this tongue tie. So it's like dysfunctional breathing, which affects nervous system regulation. It's bad back, cold hands, cold feet, cellulite, so many knock-on effects from all of it. So I'm currently doing some retraining of my tongue, lots of tongue exercises and breathing to get ready for that operation, for that tongue tie to be snipped. And it's interesting, there's having a tongue tie really affects the fascia in your body. If you haven't heard of fascia, it's kind of like a webbing that goes all over your body and holds all your organs and stuff in place. It affects your fascia. It's kind of pulled to one place in the mouth, and as I'm doing these kind of physio for the mouth and the breath, it's starting to, I guess, unwind would be the way that it would be put, unwind the fascia, which interestingly turns out a lot of trauma is held in the fascia, and so as that's starting to unwind, a lot of stuff is coming up for me, which is liberating. Like, it's a lot of letting go of unresolved, unprocessed emotional traumas, not just mine, but stuff in my DNA as well from ancestors, which is, it's great, but also exhausting. And I guess that for me kind of feeds into this podcast coming to a close for this season as well. It's all very much linked to like the throat area, to self-expression. And it's interesting, as I've kind of gone into the therapy in this last quarter of the year, just feeling like drawn away from talks, podcasts, and I guess also a continued letting go of finding satisfaction in the reaction of others and finding more satisfaction from within. So that's the theme for me personally going into 2026, and it sounds all very nice and easy right now, but it's been incredibly tough and huge emotional waves and roller coasters. But I know it's going to be absolutely amazing to have let go of that and to go through that process. It's just going to take really best part of another 6+ months. But I just feel that there's a whole new wave of like freedom, peace and choice on the other side of it. So, wow, this has been so much longer than I imagined. I was like, what am I going to talk about? It can't be more than 20 minutes. And here we go, she's still going. So I wanted to leave this final episode of the season with a few questions to you, to get you thinking about going into 2026 and what that looks like for you. So the first one is, what is serving you? And what are you holding on to because it's a habit to do so? So going into next year, what do you maybe need to start letting go of in order to truly serve yourself and what you feel drawn towards doing? Number 2, what problems do you want to solve? Because it's never going to be a world where there's not problems. There's always going to be problems, and it's just about choosing the ones that you want to spend your time on. Number 3, what is your genius? In brackets, what is so easy for you that it doesn't feel like work? And thinking about 2026 and thinking about the fact that 2025 has had a lot of things breaking down, what are you wanting to focus on in when you're going into next year that you feel is more of a rebuilding towards the next phase, whatever that looks like for you? And just remember that what is ultimately best for you is best for everyone. So that's it for the Property Lifestyle Mastery podcast season 2. We'll be back in 2027. I think we might be coming back with a different name, but that's something that we're working on separately as well, a big old rebrand. So it might be back in a different guise. But thank you so much for joining us on this journey through season 2. Please let us know your thoughts, requests for next season, and make sure that you have followed us on Spotify or wherever you listen to keep up to date with when the next episode will be released in season 3. And I don't know when that will be, but I'm waiting for the feeling to know that that's right. So until then, enjoy the rest of your 2025, and here is to a prosperous, joyful and year full of flow in 2026.